In this video, I'm going to be going over my run at the Pokemon trading card game Knoxville Regional event that was held this last weekend. To start off the video, this is the look at the list that I played at the Knoxville Regional Championship event this last weekend. I decided to play Lugia because I felt it was the best deck in the format, and with a little bit of luck, you'll be able to outplay and outpace the majority of the decks that exist in the format at the moment. There's a couple differences between my list and a typical Lugia list, so I'm going to be going over them and explaining my card choices. So as you can see, we start with a 4-3 Lugia line, and I know a lot of lists recently have been moving to a 3-2 or even 3-3 line, and myself personally, I didn't want to risk the not leading Lugia, so I thought it would be best to just maximize all of the Lugias I could have played, and I believe I only missed turn 1 Lugia once throughout the entire tournament, which is a huge added buff to probably why I ended up doing so well. This deck just cannot really function without getting that Lugia down turn 1, so even leading it is really nice because you don't have to use your ball card to go get it. You can save it for a turn 2 Luminion to access your deck for any supporter you'd like to further your game plan. Moving down though, obviously 4 Archeops, you have to play 4. I wouldn't ever want to live in a world where I play 3 and then I prize 2 of them and then I have 1 Archeops to play with the whole game, so it's awful. And then there's 2 Luminion and a Stoutland. Luminion was an MVP throughout the entire day, being able to hit my opponent for 120 damage, go back into the deck, or use it for later. The card is simply fantastic. The Stoutland put in so much work. I actually won a mirror with it later on in the tournament, which is funny enough. We'll get there. The Flying Pikachu is definitely my kind of spicy inclusion for the weekend. Flying Pikachu, I felt, would give me a good matchup versus the Lost Box decks that, after Azul had done so well at OCIC, I felt would be a good inclusion for me. And it ended up working out very well. I played against a couple of Lost Boxes throughout the tournament, and I didn't drop a single game to a Lost Box throughout the event. So I would definitely say that the Pikachu was an MVP throughout the weekend as well. Obviously, Charizard and Yveltal, can't make a Lugia deck without him. Charizard and Yveltal put in so much work throughout the event. Didn't really get to use Yveltal too much through the event, as I felt he doesn't really come in unless you play against a VMAX deck or just like a really bulky V deck, but definitely came in clutch when I needed him. Pumpkin was fantastic throughout the entire event. I played a couple of decks that played Path, and Pumpkin was your way out, especially when you play against something like Vikable and the item lock you. And then, Manaphy, Dunsparce, you won't catch me going anywhere without playing these guys. They're absolutely essential to the Lugia strategy. Playing against stuff like Reggie's, playing against stuff like Vikavolt, playing against stuff like Lost Box, those cards are absolutely essential. And to move on to the items, I played 4 Quick Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Evo Incense, a Choice Belt, a Lost Vacuum, and a Big Parasol. So, definitely something interesting is the Big Parasol. I wanted to include Parasol on this list because if you attach it to a Pikachu VMAX against Lost Box, it's basically a good game for them. They can't Sableye you, they can't attack you with their basics, so Big Parasol was a big help throughout the entire event, especially against a couple of the control decks I played against. The card was an MVP throughout the entire day. And then the energy cards, I believe I played 15. We have 4 Powerful, 4 Aurora, 3 Capture, 1 Wash, 1 Hiding, and 2 DTE. If I had to change anything from the item or from the energy count, I would maybe have changed the Hiding to a Heat energy to be able to complement the Charizard and Yveltal more. There was one time throughout the entire tournament where I believe the Hiding was a Heat, it would have won me a game instead of tying, so that could have been the difference between my top 8 or not. Wash energy was fantastic throughout the entire day, and I felt like 3 Capture energy was fine because I was playing the 4th Lugia, so if I were to change another Lugia V hard copy, it would probably end up becoming that last Capture energy. Let me go to the supporters. We have 2 Professor's Research, 2 Marnie, 2 Boss, 1 Serena, 1 Irida, and 1 Professor's Burnett. I would say that every single supporter won me a game at one point. And the supporter that I Luminion the most for was probably Professor Burnett. Professor Burnett was absolutely fantastic throughout the entire day. There would be times where I would be going second. I know, I can just Luminion for Burnett, because I already have an Alto Lugia in my hand. And I don't have enough pieces to really get the double Archeops in the discard pile turn 1 and set up for a Lugia for the following turn. So Burnett was definitely the MVP probably throughout the entire weekend. And I highly recommend anyone that is playing Lugia or wants to try out Lugia to at least try Burnett in your coming up lists. If you gotta have like a big local to go to or a 1K or a case tournament, I would definitely suggest Burnett, especially in best of 1. The card is really good, and then throughout the tournament, I don't know. I probably activated this card at least once per match, if not more. But that was going over my list, and we're going to be going into the matchups next. Looking into my matchups over the Knoxville Regional, I started round 1 at the Lugia Mirror. I ended up winning the die roll, and I won that one 2-0. I had a pretty strong lead game 1, and then going into game 2, my opponent led Dunsparce, benched to Stoutland, and passed, so they missed the turn 1 Lugia. So it's basically like I went first, so I was able to win that game as well. The Lugia Mirror is honestly pretty simple. If you go first, get double Archeops, you're probably going to win. Round 2, then I played against Lost Box. I won the die roll versus them, and I won that one 2-0. Again, Lost Box is a pretty good matchup for this deck with all of the techs. We have Stoutland, we have Flying Pikachu. Round 3, I played against Lugia Colorless, and this was actually against Ryan Ferry. He's a pretty good player, and I ended up winning the die roll against him. Game 1, I missed turn 2 Lugia V-Star, and I got Marnie Path the next turn, so I ended up losing that game. And then we had a pretty long game 2, and I was barely just able to get it out. And then game 3, we ended in a tie. We were both pretty close to like an end board situation to win. If there's a couple more turns, the game probably would have been a little bit more decisive. But I went into the next round 2-0-1. Round 4, I played against Lost Box, and same thing. Pikachu just did its thing. It prevented my opponent from really doing anything. It's really hard for Lost Box players to find, you know, Boss Rope, Rayquaza, double Mirage Gate once they're getting, you know, Flying Pikachu plus Marnie for, you know, at least a turn or 2 in a row. Usually in this matchup, I try to save the Marnies for when my opponent uses a Raihan, because then that kind of guarantees a piece in their hand that they're going to want for the next turn. Usually it's going to be the boss because it's the 1-of card in their deck. And if you Marnie to the bottom, it's going to be really hard for them to be able to find that piece again. So then if they do use another Raihan, then you Marnie them again. If they play a third Raihan, hey, you just got to win the game before then, man. Round 5, I played against Control. I mainly just used the Lumineon to kind of loop all of my energy back into my deck and take consistent knockouts. My Parasol is also an MVP in this matchup. I believe I put on a Lugia, and I was just beating all of my opponent's actives down with Lugia. I believe that they prized Miltank in the second game, so it made it really difficult for them to wall up against my Lugia, especially with the big Parasol. And so I was able to 2-0 that Control matchup. I lost the die roll, but, you know, was able to do Lugia things. Round 6, played the Mirror. Won that one 2-0. Don't have any notes for that. Round 7, I played against Vikavolt. And this Vikavolt player was very, very good. I was pretty sure I was going to lose this match. I had won the die roll. And then game 1, my opponent, I believe, had whiffed the Marnie. Or not the Marnie, the Melanie. And then had Path judged me. And I ended up losing that game. Game 2, I drew a Lugia V-Star and a Quick Ball off of the second judge path, which made me able to play. And then game 3, I went second. My opponent got the item locked down, but due to having access to Burnett, I was able to get 2 Archeops in the discard pile. And Burnett actually does really improve the Vikavolt matchup a lot. I played against 2 Vikavolts this weekend, and I ended up doing, you know, pretty well versus both of them. Unfortunately, the second one played Aerodactyl, so I wasn't able to squeak that one out, but, you know, it is what it is. Round 8, I played against Raul Reddy. He's a great player. He got top 4 at OCIC, and then I believe top 4 again at this same regional. So, yeah, he's probably one of the best Reggie players. It's not the best Reggie player out there, and definitely showed. Game 1, he punished me really hard because I wasn't able to get my Manaphy off of the prizes soon enough. He was able to take a knockout on a Dunsparce and a Pumpkaboo. And that swung the game a lot in their favor. And then game 2, I was able to, you know, go Pikachu and, you know, win the game pretty quick from there. And then game 3, we ended up in a tie. I actually had 1 energy left in my deck, and I needed to get an energy off of the prize cards. I had 2 prize cards left. Took 1. It wasn't the energy card, so that match ended up in a draw, unfortunately. Yeah, just a kind of unfortunate draw through that game as well. I believe I had researched and drew a bunch of energy, and then I read the wind, drew a bunch more energy, and then I got Marnied the next turn by Raul, and I still drew like 2 or 3 energy and no kind of ball cards. So I guess all my energy was kind of lumped in the same place, unfortunately. I think I might have drawn like 7 or 8 energy throughout that sequence, which is pretty unfortunate. And then round 9, I played the Mirror. This was probably the worst I played the whole tournament, was this round 9 Mirror. I believe I lost game 1 and then I won game 2. and I lost game 1 because I did a misplay where my opponent had a V-Guard energy, and for some reason in my head I thought it was a -20 not a -30, so I put a hiding energy on my active Lugia V-Star instead of a powerful energy. So that 20 extra damage actually ended up mattering because I would have been able to attack with my Lumineon the following turn for just enough damage to be able to knock out my opponent's active Lugia V-Star, shuffling back into the deck and then promoting a 1-prizer, and then my opponent would have had to find some way to win the prize trade because I was already up. I had knocked out a Lugia V because I went first, and then, yeah, that misplay ended up costing me that first game, and then we just went into time in the last game, and I wasn't able to squeak that one out. So I ended the day 6-0-3. So pretty solid. It's the second time I've gone undefeated day 1 at a regional. It's usually with a bunch of ties, unfortunately. Can't go 9-0. But, you know, I did what I could. So then moving on to day 2, right? I play against Arcdura round 10. So now, against Arcdura player, I had won game 1 pretty quickly. And then game 2, I believe my opponent got Arceus D-Don and then mustered into another D-Don. So I knew that game was pretty much over. And then round 11. Oh, and so then game 3 in Arcdura, I knock out his active Arceus. He has a lone Dura, and he benches another one. I am able to Yveltal, and then the second D-Don comes up with a Parasol, and unfortunately I only play 1 vacuum, and I wasn't able to remove that second vacuum, but my opponent had a very dead hand because I was able to take those 5 prizes very quickly, and so the game ended up being a tie because we both kind of just sat there drawing cards until my opponent was able to manually attach enough energy with the second Duraludon to attack. But by then I was able to just kind of go put a Lugia V in the Lugia V-Star in the active, let it eat a hit, retreat into another one, let that one take a hit, and then time had been called when I implemented that strategy, so I knew I just had to not die for the next couple of turns. So I was, you know, letting Lugia be my chump blocker for a couple of turns, and that ended up being a tie. Round 11, I play against DT Mew, and my opponent had gotten a penalty for drawing an extra card off a Genesect. That was unfortunate for him because it made a game that he was probably going to win into a game that I ended up winning. And then I believe I Yveltal his Mew, and then I think he prized his other VMAX. He had discarded one earlier in the game. That was kind of unfortunate for my opponent. I don't think they checked their prizes because we were both playing pretty fast because I think we had a really long game 1. And then round 12, I played against Control. This was probably the tie I was most upset about throughout the entire tournament because my opponent was shuffling very slow. They were doing deck searches, that would take a minute to 2 minutes. And they were playing to their out. I get it. If you want to play Control, sometimes you just have to take the tie. But I would have most likely had game against my opponent and won that match. But yeah, my opponent was just kind of playing slow. It is what it is. That's Pokemon sometimes. Round 13, I play against the Lost Box, 2 of them. It's kind of a reoccurring theme. Lost Box is a pretty good matchup for this deck. Round 14, I play against Vikavolt. Game 1, I get Aerodactyl. Unfortunately, I lose the die roll. So, I mean, that's kind of just what it is against Aerodactyl decks. Game 2, I ended up winning because I went first. And then Game 3, my opponent did a good play where they used their Aerodactyl V-Star to knock out my Lugia after a Zigzagoon ping, which I knew that Aerodactyl had an attack that did 240, and I knew I resisted it, but my opponent had a singular energy on an Aerodactyl, and I thought it was a lot of cards to be able to get Melanie, Attachment, Zigzagoon into the active, and Aerodactyl. So I unfortunately didn't even get another card to be able to bench a second Lugia, but even if I did, my opponent would have just used the V-Star attack. So I think either way that game was kind of lost. So that was my first loss of the whole tournament, was round 14, which is I think the deepest I've ever gone into an official Pokemon tournament without taking a loss. Then round 15, I play against another DT Mew, and then this match, Yveltal shined very, very much out the whole match. I think my Yveltal took 12 prize cards or something stupid. Pretty sure every single game they knocked out a VMAX, and I was able to just kind of two-shot the other ones. A lot of the times, if you go second in this matchup, they're going to smack into your Lugia. If they don't knock it out, that's amazing. as it's a V. Most of the time they end up killing it. And then the second one, you can kind of like smack into an active VMAX. They'll smack into you, hopefully not knock you out. And then you can kind of retreat into Luminion because it's kind of dead weight on your bench, especially you don't want it to get bossed up for easy prizes. And then you can use a Luminion attack, knock out a Mew, shuffle back into the deck. And then as long as you hopefully don't get, you know, like Roxanne Path, you can go into your Veltal after that to knock out the second Mew. But those are my matchups for the event. Pretty healthy mix-up of different matchups. I played against, you know, a couple Lugias, a couple Lost Boxes. I played against 2 Controls, 2 Vikavolts. I played against a Reggie. So, you know, I played against 5 different decks throughout the tournament, which it's a pretty diverse metagame at the moment. I was expecting kind of more like Gudra decks or more Lost Box decks, but maybe those decks weren't doing as well day one, so I didn't really run into a bunch of them. This regional marks my 9th day 2 as a master, so hopefully number 10 is going to end up being that top 8 slot. I got pretty close a couple of times as a master, and I'm going to be gunning for it even more now. And if I don't end up getting it throughout this season, I'm going to catch me winning the world championship, because, you know, that's the ultimate goal, right? Thank you to everybody throughout the event that gave me, you know, wise words or some affirmations, or even, you know, just like a hi, hey, how you doing? Because a lot of that stuff goes really appreciated at these tournaments, just keeping your spirits up when, you know, it's a lot of rounds to play all this Pokemon, especially, you know, on minimal water and food throughout the entire day, because, hey, nobody wants to pay $12 for a hot dog. But now I will say the price of this venue weren't too bad. But shout out to Alex and Bao. They were at the start of my journey with me to get to Knoxville. I rode with them there. Shout out to them for driving the whole way. I didn't have to drive at all, which definitely helped because I was dying. I was so tired. I think I slept halfway there, and then the rest of the half I was kind of in and out of sleep. So thank you to them for, you know, getting me to the event so I was able to participate. And then thank you to the people that I roomed with. Thank you to Mo and Amar, you know, for always having, you know, good times, good vibes, and a bunch of snacks. You know, they brought along to the tournament. It definitely helped a lot. Thank you to Nathan and Matt for also staying with us. They're the ones that booked the room, so, you know, I wouldn't have been able to stay anywhere if it wasn't for them. So thank you to them too. And thank you to all of the people in Chicagoland. Especially thank you to Fred. Fred brought me a coffee. Definitely a large Starbucks coffee too. You know, he didn't skimp out on me, so I appreciate that a lot too. And I was dying after day 1, and I didn't get a lot of sleep between the days, so that coffee definitely, you know, helped me kick it up a little bit, and I was able to finish strong on that day. I think it's a lot of other Chicago people. Some of you guys are, you know, in this picture, and a couple other ones that, you know, I put on other social media sites. And at the end of the day, we're here to play Pokemon. We're here to have fun. So that's mainly what I did this weekend. And, you know, the good finish is just icing on the cake. If you guys ever see me at an event, you know, come say hi. I'll be happy to chop it up with you. So thank you guys for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, leave me a like, you know, subscribe, you know, do something for the boy.